many friends. Robert and I grew up in Overbrook, an egalitarian neighborhood of 3 ones. 3 bedroom, 1 bath, no AC, attic fan. We spent all day outside. There were children, kids everywhere. Robert lived on Heron. We lived at 6303 Heron, closer to the railroad tracks, about 5 blocks off Crosswell by the railroad tracks. Robert lived at the corner of 6603 Heron, corner of Northdale and Heron. I say all that for context. My 97, soon to be 98-year-old mother, she's here right now. She tells this story about Robert. About 1960, we were maybe 7 or 8. We had a big party in our front yard, and Robert was there. And there were 2 parts of the party. Part 1 was cake and presents, and part 2 was my mother, by connections or by other friends, knew Kitterick. Who remembers Kitterick? Kitterick was the daily children's show on Channel 13, I believe. Mm-hmm. And she used to put on these black tights and dress like a cat with these black tights and cat ears and whiskers. Well, we were all going to go see Kitterick, which was a real thrill for us. We were going to get to be on TV. So we started the party, and my mother threw state-of-the-art parties. And state-of-the-art in 1960 was balloons. We all got a balloon, and it was such a thrill. Everybody's playing with their balloons, I guess. And then it comes time to go to the party, or to go see Kitterick. And Robert comes up to my mother and says, Mrs. Selby, can you please wait just a few minutes? I want to take this balloon home to my brother. Aww. And my mother said, well, he says, I'll run there and back. Please wait for this. We'll wait for you, Robert. So Robert takes off running. It's about a quarter mile, and he was back in no time. He'd just taken that balloon home to his brother, Mark. And you think about that kind of consideration, and it's not hereditary. I think that's socialization, to use an academic term. And it was about their mother. It was about Mildred Thomas Guillerman, who was she was so kind and soft-spoken and gentle that you would miss the fact that she was very confident, very sure of herself, very opinionated, and she knew what she wanted. And I was a smart ass. There were only 2 people I wouldn't live. One of them was Pat Cohen's mother, Mrs. Cohen. She'd go, Pat, come here right now. I was scared of that. Mrs. Mrs. Guillerman was completely different. She was just so sure of herself, so charismatic, really, to me. She was just a beautiful woman, and you can see that kind of kindness and consideration in all of the Guillermans. They're all like that. They're all very kind, considerate people. And the other thing that they all are, that Mrs. Guillerman was for sure, is they're fearless. She was not afraid of anything. She was always looking for opportunities. She was always urging her kids to do things. And you just don't see any fear in a Guillerman. They're just not there. But she was also a Thomas. And so actually, she was a Thomas. There was no Guillerman blood in Mrs. Guillerman. She was a Thomas, and the Thomases were the same way. I took one trip to Kentucky and met some Thomases. It was very important for Robert to stay in touch with everybody in Kentucky. He made trips on a regular basis with his family to see not just the Guillermans, but also the Thomases. And they are present here today. And when you see the Guillermans up here, they're not Guillermans, they're Thomas Guillermans. But that would be important for Robert, for everyone to know that there's Thomas. This is Thomas too. And I'm going to tell a little story about Mark. Speaking of Mark, he was the older brother who got the balloon. The younger brother who got the balloon. We used to have Christmas tree fights where you'd all get your Christmas trees and build Christmas tree forts and have gangs stealing trees and stuff. Well, Robert had his fort, and they stole some trees from the biggest bully in the neighborhood. I forgot his name, and It'd be bad of me to say it anyway. But the bully comes to get the trees back, and Robert's like, he's coming, Mark, he's coming. And Mark grabs a bush or a stick or something and goes right out by that picket fence and was just waiting there to defend their Christmas tree. Mark was not afraid. Robert loved to tell that story. And, there was Robert's father. You hardly ever saw Robert's father because he worked all the time. He worked hard as a pharmacist. So, and Robert was a great athlete and played every kind of sport he could play. And he was a great basketball player, of course. People don't know about him. He was a defensive stopper. They'd put him on the best guy on the other team, and he would cover. He was quick, he was fast, he was smart. He could cover anybody. Well, baseball, he was the same way. And the story he told was, and of course, his father just couldn't make it to the events. But he said they were playing a pony league game there at that field on Northdale between Dixie and Belford. And it was an all-star game, and Robert was in center field, the key position. And he said he hit 3 alley doubles. He was right-handed here, so he hit 3 doubles in the left center field alley. And he says after the 3rd double, he stands on second base, and he looks behind home plate, and there's his father looking right at him. Robert said he looked so proud, and it made me feel so good. So, Robert loved his father. So then, I also want to talk a little bit about Robert and music, because we listen to a lot of music together. Robert's number one, Robert loved soul music, and number one was Sam Cooke. He loved Sam Cooke. He loved the song "Nobody Knows the Trouble I Seen." That was his favorite song. He also liked "A Change Is Gonna Come," but he liked all of it. And Sam Cooke had this soaring tenor. He would soar and hold that note as long as he wanted. He was a gospel singer first, but his voice was so clean, so pure, no warbling. He held the note. He was a great soul singer. And Robert's soul was just like that. Robert's soul was clean. It was not stained by things like anger, judgment, grudges, bitterness. There was none of that in Robert. You could say that he was forgiving, but to say somebody's forgiving implies a judgment to start with. And that just wasn't there. Robert, what a clean soul he had. My soul was plenty state. And I was an Otis Redding man. So we would listen hours to Otis Redding versus Sam Cooke. And Otis worshiped Sam and covered about 10 of Sam's songs. And we had so much fun. The other, I'm gonna cut a little short here, but the other singers he loved, of course, there was Van Morrison. And I'm gonna tell one Van Morrison story. In the early 70s, everybody loves all, the regular Van Morrison, Band and Street Choir, Moon Dance, Tupelo Honey, St. Dominic's Preview. Those are the ones everybody loved. The one Robert loved from the get-go was the first one, Astral Weeks, which has several extended cuts. They're all 7 minutes long, and nobody listens to 7 minutes of songs back then. But Robert loved those songs. He loved the song Astral Weeks, and he loved the song Cypress Avenue. And there was a party in San Antonio in the early 70s that we were all at. We were all poor. That was back at the beginning of Southwest. That was Big Harry, Richard Powers, selling Tejano music down in the valley, taking orders on the phone and delivering those orders out of his car. Respect due. And after that, they moved up. They started the Austin office, and the rest, of course, is history. But at the party, Robert never got drunk. I could count on one hand the times I saw Robert Guillerman get drunk, and that was a feat, because all of his friends were oblivion drinkers. Myself included. We drank until all the beer was gone. It was that simple. But Robert didn't. But that one night, he got a little tipsy. And he had a $5 bill. He was walking around with this $5 bill at this party, going to everybody and saying, "I'll give you $5. All you got to do is say, I like Van Morrison. So I like Astral Weeks. All you got to say, I like Astral Weeks." And I'm saying, "Robert, man, what are you doing?" He said, "Yeah, everybody's going to take your money." Of course, $5 then in the 70s, that's like 20, 25. Who knows how much money that is now? It's a lot more than 5. And so I'm like following around to make sure he's all right. Well, and he's saying it to everybody. All you got to do is say, "I like Van Morrison." I like Astral Weeks. And nobody even listened to Astral Weeks. They'll go, "Well, I never even listened to Astral Weeks." I don't care if you listen to it. All you got to just say is, "I like Astral Weeks." So he's going on and on. Not one person at that party took that money. Not one. And if they'd have taken the money, the rest of us would have shamed him into giving it back.
Yeah.
So, you know, I've got lots of music stories, but I'm going to cut them short because we're hot. So the other one was, who else did it? I mean, Bob Marley, Bruce Springsteen. The story he tells about them was that the thing they had in common was the early 70s when he was going to U of H. And he said that he was driving to school on both occasions. And the first time he heard a Bob Marley song on the radio, he liked it so much that he immediately said, "I'm going to be late for class." And first thing he did was he went to a record store and bought the album. It was Catch a Fire, his album, and the song was Kinky Reggae. I went down to Piccadilly Circus. Down there I saw Marcus. The album's more famous for Spirit Up, Concrete Jungle, Slave Driver. Great songs, great album. And that sound was so unusual to hear at the time. The closest we'd come to reggae at that time was My Boy Lollipop by Billy Spall, which is a great song too. Makes my heart go giddy up. All in there. So there was that record, and then there was, and Robert was all about social justice. He really identified with Bob Marley and Bob Marley's the social justice message of Bob Marley. That was so important to Robert. He didn't lord it over anybody. He always was for the underdog, for the poor, and with his heart and with his money. He was social justice. There should be a better way to say that without sounding so cold, but it wasn't cold for Robert.
Thank you.
Same thing, he's driving and he hears Rosalita off of The Wild, the Innocent, and the E Street Shuffle, and immediately goes to the record store, buys that record, and that record is wild, it's innocent, and it's the E Street Shuffle. Sparks fly on E Street when the boy prophets walk in, handsome and hot. I mean, that music it revived rock and roll. It was joyful, it was cluttered, it was busy. It was great. Robert became a big Bruce Springsteen promoter. And raise your hand if you got a free ticket to Southwest for anything, for concerts, for
It's my first concert with Springsteen.
I'd almost be easier to ask who hasn't got one. My mother might be the only person to raise her hand. Southwest gave everybody tickets, and it spread so much fun and joy amongst all their friends. We had a blast going to those shows. And if you're a baseball fan, raise your hand if you ever sat in those Diamondback seats they had. We need to talk. There you go. That's the best baseball experience I've ever had. We're down there sitting with George Bush. We're getting hot dogs at the line with George Bush. Hi, George. How's it going?
All right, y'all give it up for Steve. Come on. A performance about to go down, Steve.